Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you may see a little link down below. You can click on that, and that'll let you register in Zoom. Once you're in Zoom, you'll see another little link in the chat, and you can click on that, and you'll end up in Makana, and that's where you become a producer. Your questions, your votes, and your chat really drive the entire conversation, so we'd love to have you be part of that. The first hour is open season, whatever you'd like to talk about related to video or virtual production or audio production as well. And the second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on, and it ranges all over the place. And today, we're going to be talking about working with C-suite, so the executives that we work with in events and what it takes to do that and things that you want to think about. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about remote switching. A lot of us are switching as COVID has continued to kind of move along. We have figured out how to not be in the same place as our switcher. And so we're going to talk about how we manage that. And then, of course, on Saturday, we have the education hours, 9 to 11, where we talk about it. That's not streamed to YouTube, so if you want to be part of that, you need to actually be in Zoom for that. All right, Bill, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Okay, our first one comes from Rupert McCrae, and Rupert has, from Dallas, Texas, says, how is the Office Hours 2.0 setup going?
It's going well. You can see it. You can see a little bit of it down in the ZoomOSC window there, if you take a look at that. So that is that is us playing with that. Now that's what you're seeing there are 4 different Mac Mini M1s that are going out of DeckLink Duos inside of some Sonnet boxes. And there's the they all are. You can see it's very high tech, and then those are all going out into a router, into a Blackmagic router, and then into a ATEM constellation, and then 16 of the outputs are going out of the constellation into the Blackmagic multi-view, and then it comes out to you. And so we're what Andy's been here for the last couple days, and what you're seeing in that gallery that Andy was showing is the gallery basically is doing what Zoom does, which takes the last certain number of people, in this case 16, and puts them in the last person to talk, just fills in the last space that was the oldest one there, so it's a kind of an interesting process. What I will say is, for those of us who have been looking at that screen, it looks amazing because we're pulling 1080p out of everything. You'll also know that even our gallery here looks smoother because that system on that side is requesting 1080p across the board. So actually, we're getting a better signal in our experience here because of the fact that it's requesting everybody at 1080p. So I can see it right now just looking at Zoom, at my house, that everyone looks clearer and sharper than they did before, because Zoom will only produce what it has to, from every person. And so now it has to produce all of us at 1080p. And so it's an interesting puzzle to kind of work through there. But it looks amazing in 4K. It looks super sharp, because remember that with that, again, it'll be very, very high resolution as we move forward. So this is like basically, hello world kind of stuff. I mean, we literally had it working 20 minutes ago, and 20 minutes for 20 minutes we had it working. We invited everybody in yesterday in Discord, and suddenly we had 50 people there, and we were able to test it and got through a bunch of other ideas. But you'll see us continue to test it throughout the August. Probably won't deploy it, and you'll see it in spits and starts, maybe a day, a week through August, and then we probably won't really deploy it until September. And then the goal is by the end of September, it's very smooth. Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm just curious, are they 4 Mac Minis aligned logically to the multi-view, like 1, 2, 3, 4, left to right or up and down?
For now, yeah. I mean, it's a little arbitrary, but yeah, right now they're just going across. 1 is the top row, 2 is the second row. But that is how they're ordered. Who goes into those Mac Minis depends on who was the last person to talk, because it's figuring all of that stuff out. Go ahead, Courtney.
So the labels that are at the bottom, that's coming out of the constellation. That's just the multi-view, yep. Tags. Then
that's currently
going to be able to import the data from the Zoom call and.
Well, we're hoping to do actually one step better, which is that
lower thirds.
The goal is to design lower thirds, and then have those so that there's going to be some point where we kind of register who the panelists are. So it's, so people who want to be on the panel someday will come in on the weekends or come in the pre-show, post-show. We'll get to know them. But the people who are already known to us will be the ones that we kind of set up for these panels. And that lower third will get designed for them. You'll give me your name, you'll give me your title that you want, whatever you want there. Then ZoomOSC will tie whatever, you'll have to put a certain thing in to your thing. And Scott, you can stop spotlighting that. That's really hard for me to do if you do that often. Whoever's doing the spotlighting, don't do that anymore. Like do it like once, like just take a little quick. You should spotlight like 4 times a show because spotlighting is really disruptive to me. So as the speaker, and so I have to constantly flip back to gallery. So anyway, so what will happen is we'll tie your lower third to your Zoom name, and then your lower third will pop up based on that. So we'll know we're tying your identification to a graphic that exists, and that's where we're going to go with it. So we won't care what your name is. I mean, you'll have to have it there, but it doesn't have to be something short. It can be like, we'll give you a certain number of characters to put in there. Go ahead, Stuart.
I just noted the Sky ended up causing alex.exe to load in a stuttering format there. What's the latency of all of this? Like when the multi-view was up and I was actually holding my hand up, I actually wiggled my thumb and was able to count from how long it took for me to see it on NDI and then to see it coming back to me within the grid view.
Yeah,
does it
it's
add
actually
a
so
lot of
for
latency?
the show itself. For us, it won't have as the people in the panel will have zero. The latency will be, the same latency we have with Zoom. In fact, it's superior to the system that we have in that sense. It's superior to the system that we have right now, where we bring everybody in on an individual connection, because that individual connection is we're doubling the latency by going through our hardware, because of the round trips. So for us, the latency will be very low. You may see a longer latency there, but that's going to be the output to the world. And so our talking latency will be very low. There might be a little latency to the rest of the world as it goes through the system, but we're interacting inside of Zoom, not through the hardware. So it should be, so for us, it should be essentially, that's the real power of ZoomOSC. I'm sorry, ZoomISO, is that ZoomISO is giving us the ISO channels, and it's sitting in the back end and pulling them out. The one limitation that we have with the other system, which is why we still use it, is because it gives us ISO audio, and we don't have that yet out of Zoom. So when we have ISO audio out of Zoom, we'll be able to, the system will probably over time supplant the other system, just because it allows us to do this more effectively. Go ahead, David.
Will there be a limit to the size of the panel?
It's limited by the number of computers that we have. So, like right now it would be limited to 20, because I have five computers. If there was a strong demand for more, we could just add another Mac Mini and you could just add a Mac Mini and a Sonnet box and a thing. So it's $1,500 per 4 people, to add more capacity to it. So it's not, and it's bandwidth, but we have plenty of bandwidth in the office. So I'm not, so there's, because you're adding 25 megs roughly. So 25 megs per 4 people, so per, segment, you'd add 25 megs of up and down. So, well, yeah, not quite as much down, but up. Yeah. So the, So you do have to consider that as well from the ISO perspective. The reality is that we may, we're trying to figure out as we go into 2.0 how big the panel's running pretty successfully right now in that 16 to 20 range. So we're kind of leaning towards the idea that eventually we'll invite 20 people per day, like weeks in advance or a week in advance or whatever. We'll invite 20 people to be on the panel, based on what we're talking about. Some people will be regulars, and some people will be like the audio folks will be slightly different on the audio day, and so on and so forth. Invite 20, trying to make sure that 16 show up. So that's the I think we're settling into the number that 16 is a pretty good number for the panel. It doesn't have to be any larger than that, but we're open to making it larger if it makes sense. But I found that the conversation somewhere between 16 and 24 is at its best. It's a little slow. We get stumped a little bit more often under 16. and over 24, it gets chaotic. So right now I'm kind of leaning towards adding one more Mac Mini once this is working, and sit inside that 24 range, and that'll probably be the limit to what we're doing. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Should our Zoom stats reflect right now that you're pulling 1080 out of us? Who should we be sending? Or only when I'm talking like right now? I just bumped because I just went on screen, but
yeah, I don't know. It should show 1080, but because it's pulling 1080 from everyone. It's interesting. Go ahead, Courtney. I can't hear you, Courtney.
Yeah, sorry. I clicked 3 times. Darn it. How are you getting 4? Are you getting 4 HDMI outs out of each one of those? Are they M1 Mac
SDI?
Minis?
M1
going SDI,
and they're SDI, and they're coming out via the Decklink cards. So these are Decklink duos, and so each one of them gets 4. What are you sending out, Chris? It's
currently I look like I'm sending 1280/720. Until I started talking, it was still 644/80.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to keep on looking at that, because it should be pulling. It does look sharper to me for whatever reason. Right now.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the Zoom gallery. You're right. I wouldn't think that it would, but it really does look great, and I can't wait to see the 4x4.
Yeah.
As a feed instead of a camera. Come on, Andy. Come on, you could do it.
I mean, the big thing is that all the work that you can definitely see when even when we were testing yesterday, is all the work that the panelists have done of making things look a lot cleaner. Really makes this thing look amazing when you stack everybody up. That suddenly everybody looks really, really good, better than most broadcasts. And again, because we're mostly using radio mics or at least really good mics. The audio is really good, the video is really good, and all we have to do now is improve the quality of the graphics and streaming and everything else around it. I mean, you saw that a little bit when we did the WWDC test of how much sharper it looks, how much sharper it's capable of, and then we had to back up and figure out how to make that sustainable. So we're getting closer to making that sustainable. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, Daniel McFarland in Belfast, UK is up next with any recommended wireless access points for home use, and he's looking for multiple price points.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Well, home use can mean a lot of different things these days, because a lot of people are doing all kinds of different things at home. So for different price points, though, I mean, I find it really difficult for a reason to go outside of the Ubiquiti range, really. If you can get into that for like $80 on an AC light. And if you want to go lower than that, then you're just putting yourself in a corner that it's difficult to grow out of later.
Go ahead, Stuart. Oh, go ahead, Stuart.
I should point out my internet is just starting to drop out for some reason. Netgear 3700, access point or range extender, and TP-Link, make a little one that's easy to travel with. Short range only for the budget things. I wouldn't trust this for more than about 15 meters outdoors and 5 meters indoors. But it's something to travel with if you need a little bit at a hotel room or the like.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, ditto on the Ubiquiti, but we've had great success with the Google MiFi's, the Google Wi-Fi's mesh network, and the Aero, obviously in the States has been around for ages. That's kind of only recently come to the UK because when Amazon bought it. And the Aero if I could have gone Aero years ago, I would have gone there straight away.
At any price, since we said multiple price range, I would always pick Meraki. So it's just like if you've got the cash, it's the best as far as the ease of use and control, but Ubiquiti otherwise. I'd agree with that. Let's jump to the next question.
Comes to us from Liberty White, who is not on the panel today. We're always upset about that. Come back, Liberty. She asks, I was on a group call on Facebook and someone asked about recording it. What's the best professional way to grab a Facebook group call?
It would be I would say a screen scrape into an external recorder is going to give you the highest quality. So that can be one of the Blackmagic monitors. I have one plugged into my computer all the time. I have an old Pix 240 that I have plugged into my computer all the time that I can just hit record and it'll record everything that I want to record there. Obviously, if you have an ISO ATEM, you can push it out that way too. You can just have the HDMI come out of your computer into that, but that's going to be the highest quality. You can do screen shares, but you'll end up with lower frame rates oftentimes. Go ahead, David.
If audio only is needed, you can just use hijack and just grab that.
Yep. Absolutely. Next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae here on the panel and from Dallas, Texas. There are more than 200 LiveU packages in use at the Olympics. What kind of management platform would be used to manage and ingest that many LiveU feeds?
Big Excel sheet, most likely. There's probably something. There's probably something for them to do it, but I bet you the producer's got a giant Google Doc that just manages which SDI outputs are coming. Because with those, they're not sending those into the cloud. They're most likely sending them to a piece of a hardware appliance. So the hardware appliance is sitting there, and it's just routed. Like this one is this, and this one is this, and they just know what SDIs are coming out of the hardware appliance. Go ahead, Bill.
From having been backstage kind of at some relatively large events, nothing the scale of the Olympics, but the number of producers, associate producers, helpers on the teams going out with camera crews would sometimes shock you. It's not just a camera person out there by themselves. I mean, sometimes maybe on the edge of the track, that's coming back to the truck and they're doing everything. But in a lot of those circumstances, there's a lot of support personnel making that happen behind the scenes.
Yeah, but it's probably just a routing issue. I mean, and again, we'd love to say that they may have a management tool, and I'm sure that it looks really cool, but it's probably just an Excel sheet or a Google Doc that's managing what outputs are going where. Go ahead, Richard.
I was lucky enough to get a demo from LiveU recently about their whole system because we were looking at it, and the management stuff that they do in the cloud is absolutely phenomenal about connecting LiveU in Manchester to a server in London. It's incredibly impressive.
Yeah, we've used it. We had a DC instance, where we had an appliance, and we brought LiveUs in from all over the world. So it's a pretty impressive way of routing those, but most of the time they will keep them pretty stationary, once they get going. Next question.
Daniel McFarland in Belfast, the UK says, when the panel becomes invite only, how would one request to join?
What we're going to probably do with the panel is, at some point, the Monday through Friday is going to be much different than the rest of the office hours, as we move forward. I mean, that's kind of the thing. So we're going to be, looking for for those 2 hours, we'll be looking for folks that, have the right quality and are the right mix for what we're doing, especially for given days. And for the way to show up in those things is to have shown up for the last year and a half, number one. And number two, to, weekends will still be wide open, pre-show, after, or the after hours. And that's how we'll get to know people. But it's going to be less of a anybody wants to show up can show up thing as we move forward. It'll be more of a picking the right folks, and again, that'll be a mixture of audio and visual quality, quality to the panel. We'll be looking at a panel like, we have this day, we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff like this. They're really great to have these people in here. There'll be people that are regulars. There'll be people that have kind of open-ended. They'll get invited all the time, but it'll change a little bit because we're about to shift gears, for what we're doing. So we're balancing, after hours is wide open and people can still be part of that and everything else. But the office hours, the 2 hours, 5 days a week is going to be a broadcast. I've been warning everybody it's coming for a year. so it's been a slow little thing, and people either heard it or they didn't. But it's going to be a broadcast like I think like nothing anyone's ever seen before. But it means that people who come in, and they'll have to have their technical stuff really working. We won't have as much room for that to not work, and it'll just be, and then they just it just has to add to the panel. In different ways. It can be adding levity to the panel, adding context to the panel, adding, conversation. It doesn't mean that they all have to be super technical, but they just have to add to it. And it's going to largely look exactly what it looks like now. But the other problem is that we're going to start promoting it much wider once we get through September and things are running really quickly. You're going to see us just start telling people, more and more people, about it. And that means that there'll just be way too many people that are interested than we can manage. So we have to, with that growth, will have to come some controls, to tie that in. And so that's, those are the, growing pains that we'll go through through the fall, as we kind of work through it. But the numbers of people watching may or may not increase dramatically in the next 6 months. And so we, it's just that's kind of the nature of what we're doing. Next question.
Comes to us from often panelist John Pruitt of Huntersville, North Carolina. And John asked, Room added apps on their last update. What are the current panelist thoughts about app?
Go ahead, Brant.
I was disappointed to see things like multiple virtual background generators, and then further disappointed to see things like, or not see some of the announced launch partners like Slido. So as I'm going through the list, I'm seeing a whole lot of things that look great on a list, but aren't particularly useful.
Yeah, it looks like it's a little limited to get it coming out of the gate, but we'll see if it gets better, over time. Next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae here in the panel, and Rupert asks, NBC Universal and Roku have partnered to deliver a new immersive Olympics experience on the Roku platform in the US. What's the panel's thoughts on Roku as a viewing platform overall, and specifically on its viability for something like the Olympics?
Rupert, can you tell us what's happening, what they're actually doing?
Yeah, so I don't know whether it's truly immersive as we would interpret it, but it's certainly some kind of interactive, you get to see some stats and some meta information like on the home screen before you actually go and view a feed, and you can like switch between, feeds and events and things like that. But it's mainly seems to be a more interactive experience.
Good, Leland.
As one who's had a Roku for at least 7 or 8 years now, back to Roku 3, I've been pretty impressed with the feature set and the ability for the Roku to perform. I would recommend you look for the models that have the extra SD cards installed so that you can have the apps load more data ahead of time so they don't have to queue up data as they load. The other thing that we discovered is the smaller 4K version that they have now mounts onto your TV really conveniently, but it doesn't seem to hold up as well, and it's only on a 2.4 gig Wi-Fi frequency. It doesn't allow you to use the 5 gig frequency anymore, and I'm not sure why they did that. So otherwise, real happy with the Roku devices.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, for $10, Sling TV will give you all the NBC networks, the Olympic channel, anyways, you get for $10 for the first month. So it's really a cheap way to watch all the Olympic channels.
Yeah. It's interesting to see. Most people that there's like a lot of people that have Roku, and then people who have Apple TVs just use Apple TV. That's been my experience. It's like once they have an Apple TV, everything else just slowly. I had all of them, and then I've just slowly not used them anymore. I think it's just because there's too much stuff that's all in one place, and it's too hard to switch back and forth, and you just end up using. Like my TV is only connected to the world through the Apple TV, so I don't let my TV talk to the internet, which I'm super sensitive about because I don't trust TV companies. So the only thing that goes out to the world is the Apple TV. And I think that most people that I talk to that use an Apple TV often then just use it only. And so it's an interesting model. Next question.
Comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And Chris asks, I'm working on some vertical 9:16 signage videos, toying with Keynote for the text portions. Am I barking up the wrong tree, or is there a way to rotate the canvas that I'm?
Can you set a custom canvas, Carl?
Yep. So let's go. So what you want to do, here's your presentation 16:9 wide when you set it up. Go up to the top corner, hit document. Once you've hit document, come down, you'll see widescreen, that's the default setting. Change that to custom. In custom, I've got it set up for 1080 here, so you're changing it to width is going to be 1080 and your height's going to be 1920. So that's going to be your portrait mode. Once you've done that and you hit OK, there you go.
I just want to point out that Carl did that while we were talking. Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
Carl amazes all of us. I just wanted to note that if you're doing this, please test particularly on auto rotate devices. I know that Apple's iPhones and all their iDevices auto rotate. So do I believe the other Samsung and other models. Just test it and make sure that
this is just for screens, I think.
Yeah,
these
but
are
if you're
for
rotating,
signage. These
I've
are
gotten
signage, though.
stuck with everything in the wrong format when it actually goes out the door.
Yeah, you do have to make sure that your device, to your point, whether it's rotated or not, the device itself has the rotating button. I think is what Bill's, as Bill's talking through it, is being able to rotate 90 degrees for signage, but all the Mac Minis can, and a lot of other PCs. I think the B-Link can do it as well. So, I mean, the PC can do it. So a B-Link would be, by Courtney, would be a perfect thing to have in the back of a screen and make that work. Go ahead, Chris.
I had to cut a vertical video once, and we had no way of propping the monitor up, and I literally had to cut it for like a week on my side.
Not that you're bitter. Next question.
I'll just never get over having one that it was on its side no matter how you rotated the phone. It drove me crazy. We're moving on to Douglas Carmichael's question. Where do you see the role of the IT security professional in today's and tomorrow's production environment?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So I would say start with the facts. I mean, more and more is going IT based over IP in the cloud. It's going to be a bigger part of everything moving forward. And then the other fact is cyber security and threats and risks are getting higher and higher, and the attacks are getting bigger and bigger. Now, whether an IT professional can solve that problem, it can help, but really the security in the future is going to come in IT training for people, because the breaches and the problems generally occur when they have a human element, and that's through, you solve that through awareness and training.
Good, Courtney.
And after the Sony break-in from a few years ago, especially with the large entertainment companies during production, they're very tight on what kind of information and assets can be sent over IT, and they're very high security, and they only use high security transports to transport that data because they're so paranoid of something leaking out before its release date.
Go, David.
Yeah, and we have a pretty rigorous vetting process when dealing with vendors and other properties like that because of intellectual property.
Yeah, absolutely. Leland, real quick.
Yeah, we just sat with the public health department yesterday in a meeting, or public health institute in a meeting yesterday for that very reason, so that we knew we had the right IT professionals in place to handle the security of such a high level event that we're dealing with in October. It's definitely key to these organizations.
Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida says, does the group have any advice on ways to decrease sibilance when using the Pyle PMHM2 headset mics?
Go ahead, Carl, and then David.
So I'll suggest two hardwares. So this is a hardware I own. It actually works quite well. So it actually has a de-esser on it, and it has two frequencies, male and female. This is 2 channels, so you can run 2 channels if you really need to. And you can change the level of the de-esser. The next option would be to go to something like an Art Voice. It's a lot more expensive, but it has a variable frequency, so you can actually really tune in the de-esser. It just has a really good de-esser on it as well for under around $500 US.
Go ahead, David.
I'm actually using that very microphone today. So Sally sells seashells by the seashore, and I'm going straight into the computer with no processing or anything. So,
and I think also pulling it back a little bit definitely helps. So if you're getting sibilance, the best filter is to move it back an inch. So it's because it's where it's at. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Greg. Can't hear you, Courtney.
Sorry, I gotta get that mouse button fixed. The cheapest solution comes with the microphone, which is this little foam windscreen, which kind of attenuates the high end a little bit, and that might get rid of some of your sibilance. Little foam thing put over.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, Courtney has probably the least expensive solution. There's also any number of VST plugins that you can get, particularly from Waves. Waves has a sibilance and a de-esser plugin. You can get those for like $35, $40 and add those to some kind of digital audio workstation.
That's great. Next question.
Brian Brecker in Charlottesville, Virginia is up next, and he says, what's the easiest method to build a talkback IFB push-to-talk system that works with isolated Zoom breakout rooms? Considering a MIDI controller managing the producer mic into mix-minus returns, what software or alternative method would the panel recommend?
SM58 with a switch. for the mic itself, like that is just that's been the easiest one. I mean, that's the cheapest, easiest. Like I can just flip a switch and talk to everyone. Now you're gonna have to figure out how you wire all those back in. So that's where you have to build mix minuses, and that can be. You just need for every place that you need to talk with a mix minus, you need a bus. So you just have to look at how many buses you have within whatever mixer you're using. An X32 will do most of that for you. You can build it into an X32, but we typically use a Yamaha QL1 and an X32 currently. I was trying to figure out where our other X32 was, and they were like, Brian is using it for something else in the system. So go ahead, Leland.
Of course, Alex's favorite system, the voice meter potato. You can connect various PCs together with that component. We've used virtual machines in conjunction with that. You can assign apps from those virtual machines into separate buses, like Alex mentioned. And as long as you run the audio out of Zoom into a separate bus through voice meter back into a breakout through those virtual machines, you can control them, but you have to switch from room to room individually. It's not like you can open up all the mics at once. You do have to get a push to talk going. So.
Yep. Next question.
Comes from our friend Housemuck in Cape Town, South Africa. For the cooking show, using Zoom meetings and or a webinar, using ZoomOSC with StreamDeck Companion. MixEffects was great for managing super sources on Extreme for the medical event. Andy, specifically Carluccio, who I believe is still listening here, are there any reasons to look at or explore ZoomISO in that kind of showcase?
I don't know if Andy's behind the Zoom ISO. I think that Zoom OSC and ISO are going to go very well with MixEffect Pro. So we're talking about using all of those together so that we can animate between super sources and put them together, and being able to deliver all of those to an ATEM, and then have that ATEM getting driven by MixEffect Pro from commands from ZoomOSC. So I think all of those, that is kind of a piece that we're kind of pulling together into one unit to make all of this work. Next question.
Comes from Chad Lafarge, who's behind the scenes working hard to make sure the show goes smoothly. Asks, has anyone used Zoom Room NDI to get 1080p in the cloud, preferably with vMix? Any best practices to offer for operating multiple rooms in Amazon Web Services?
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I've used Zoom Room NDI quite a bit. I've probably done about a dozen events using it just locally. The trick with using it in the cloud is that right now there's no web controller. So typically when I do cloud events with rooms, I'm using a web controller to manage the pins. Right now, the web controller is not supported in Room NDI. And I actually did do an event this past week though, using rooms in the cloud, and the hurdles that you have to overcome is how to get the controller to talk to the cloud instances. And so the solution that we've come up with, actually Jonas came up with the solution, is you have to run a VPN server inside of AWS, and then you've got to run some sort of VPN software on your tablet device. And if you do that, then you can get the tablet to see the cloud instance, and you can manage the rooms in the cloud.
And have you played with ZoomISO related to that? Because it should be able to grab a whole bunch of those feeds at one time.
I have not, Alex, used ZoomISO, and so I'm sorry, Andy, I'm not a Mac guy. So I just don't have any. I don't have any Macs.
ZoomISO doesn't work. ZoomISO doesn't work currently in the Windows.
ZoomISO doesn't work in a Windows environment.
So you'd have to use one of them. You'd have to use Amazon's Mac Mini solution, which is like $1.50 an hour or something like that. So it's a little bit more expensive, but you could do it with that way. But that would be it's just a lot more expensive than the other instances. But still $1.50 an hour or $2 an hour rather than pennies. Go ahead, Rupert.
Just a couple thoughts on this. I mean, to get 1080 out of Zoom at all, you need to make sure your machine is spec'd appropriately. So if you're in AWS, you want to make sure you get one of those G instances so that the machine is
well. But I think that if you want ZoomISO, you'd have to use the Amazon Mac Mini solution. Mm-hmm. You know, like that would be. And from Andy's, and we can, when Andy comes in another point in time, I think that you can get a lot of NDI out of one Mac Mini. It's not very processor intensive. Go ahead, David. Okay. Next question.
Moving on, this one from Housemuck again in Cape Town. And he says he received his 2 AutoPoles, the Manfrotto AutoPoles. Anything I need to be aware of or need to be anxious to avoid any calamities? And he does note he has a concrete ceiling, so that may work in his favor. Yes, it will.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
AutoPoles are great. The key to them, there's 2 keys. Make sure that you have those rubber feet on both ends. Don't take them out. They can slip out easily. And if you think, I'll just try it without it, don't do that. A stable ceiling at the top. They're really bad with like acoustical tiles. So you're great with the concrete top, and just get it out the maximum you can with your hands before you crank that lever down, and it should not move. That and just basically leveling and getting it perpendicular and horizontal. Or in vertical.
I also use them horizontally, but I did make sure that I put some kind of a bracing on other ends, and you can use actually shower curtain rod from your local Home Depot or your office or home.
Go next question.
Moving on, Hasmuk has another one here. XLR cable for 6K is reversed male-female. Micro XLR is female. Do I really need this cable? I recorded audio by running a T3 from stereo out on a mix pre and into the audio in on the T3 on the 6K. Works great with an XLR mic on a mix pre as the main mic. So why does he need an XLR for 6K?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, it does provide phantom power, so you can plug a microphone right in there and go with it. And it is the right connection if you're trying to get audio into the camera.
It's balanced as well. So you run the risk of running a buzz. We've never had the same quality. We've had very good quality from the 1/8" jack. We've never had the same quality on an 1/8" jack as we have with the XLR input. And yes, it's really frustrating that they reversed the pins in the camera. I think it just looks nicer, and it does. That's why they did it. I mean, literally, I think it's just a cosmetic thing that it's a little easier to manage because they have it in other ones, but every other device has it reversed than from what they have. So you have to order those ahead of time. And I ended up ordering like 5 of them because I'm like, I'm never going to have to look for this cable again, and I still look for it. Anyway, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's back with Alex. You mentioned that Office Hours 2.0 will be more of a broadcast feel. Will there still be an opportunity on the weekends and during after hours to test and tune one system and get to know the panelists, almost like an audiovisual racetrack, so to speak?
Yeah. I mean, what's coming with all of this is as we tighten up office hours itself, we are opening up after hours. And so after hours will run basically 23 hours a day. So after hours, by the end of August, we'll be running all the time that office hours isn't running. And you already seen us, we experimented yesterday with it. JJ was building the cables that you saw earlier this morning. He was building those inside of after hours. We have people coming in and doing their own little tests and everything else. And so there's actually more of that informal that's coming. And that's kind of there to balance out the fact that the 5 days a week show is going to get much tighter. And the weekends will still be, wide open and people can jump in and everything else. But the 5 days a week program will be tighter and with more overhead to tighten it, because it's also going to be during the week will be a training ground for us to figure out how to do remote broadcast at a really, really high level. 4K, HDR, eventually immersive audio, with people all over the world at really high quality cameras, and it's all of us experimenting with that. And so we need it to be, it's just going to be something that we're trying to push the world forward, and away from the kind of tired stuff that we get most of the time. So anyway, it's all of us figuring that out together. So it's not just the panel that's going to change. We're going to have, instead of me just figuring out who's going to be in the second hour, we'll have a team for that. Instead of Carl just doing his, the Carl graphics, we'll have a team that supports Carl or does it or whatever, that does those things. We'll be building teams around all those things. So all of us get an opportunity to learn how to do it and figure it out at a very high scale. So it's a lab for what I think could potentially be the next generation of broadcast. That's more conversational. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's done. So Josh Kaufman's up next with from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Are there any caveats to using the Zoom Room's device hack to ensure 720p in Zoom meetings? A recent meeting declined my offer to use a portal because of the concern that the higher bandwidth might hinder some with lower connection speed.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
So the jump to 720 isn't huge. I mean, it can be when you get up to 1080, but 720 is a modest increase. And in most circumstances, it should be fine. And you'll should find that many participants, if their computer can't handle it, it may not send it. So 720 is just not a huge problem.
Go ahead, Brent.
We've done some fiddling around with pinning and then changing the size of the window so that if you can get one person in at 720 and the other person's having bandwidth issues, you can reduce the size of the window until it snaps down to that lower resolution. But then you're going to get recordings with different resolutions in it. So there's pluses and minuses.
Go ahead, David.
And one of the other issues is if you're forcing that higher bandwidth to all participants and you're hitting a campus of people, that's multiple of that amount of bandwidth coming into a facility.
Yeah, it's just that the main thing We don't see that much. We see it with a 1080. Like we forced a 1080 here, and we definitely see glitches and things that come with that push. So pushing to 1080 definitely has some drawbacks to it when people don't have, especially when they join with Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi makes a huge difference in 1080. More than the 720. We find the 720 to be pretty robust. It's just so much easier to watch. I think that when people look at whatever the possible drawbacks are. One of the things that I've really talked to a lot of people about, and we're really thinking about a lot, is cognitive load. And that's what we think of as Zoom fatigue, quote unquote. When we have bad audio, bad video, unstructured conversations, what we're doing is we're increasing the cognitive load on all the viewers. It just means our brain, we are ignoring it actively. The brain is actively filtering out the fact that there's bad audio and bad video. And it's why it's one of the reasons people get tired of Zoom meetings, is because they're bad, because people have bad connections. The platform itself is capable, as we find every day, you're capable of effortlessly having these conversations for long periods of time when the audio and the video is good. It gets really taxing when the audio and the video is bad. Go ahead, Brant.
Yeah, real quick. We mostly, as far as caveats go, we mostly saw it transcontinental. So when we were going to Australia or to the UK from the US, that's where we mainly saw those issues of the bump to 720 causing problems.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, so would it be a good workaround just to, obviously if a person's on a device, they're not going to get the 720p. So if they're on a phone or something that doesn't have the screen capable, they won't get it. Maybe just to provide that for everyone for the high quality, and then advise people who may be having issues, here, bump your screen down a little bit. Your connection.
I've just never seen that many people have issues watching it. It's sometimes their ability to deliver it is limited, but I've just never, we just almost never see anyone break up for their experience on the downside. Next question.
Stan Chan's back in from Roseville, California. He says, open source software seems to not be as common in this industry compared to others. Is commercial software the sole way any entrepreneur approaches software for media production? Would more OSS be better for the industry?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think this just all depends on the criticality of your project and who you are going to call or what resources you're going to call upon when you have a problem. Are you going to want to jump onto online forums and try asking around in some community, or do you want somebody you can call who will give you support immediately?
Yep. Go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, I think open source, when we talk about that in general, OBS is obviously one of the largest open source projects when it comes to video streaming, and has been for several years. There are a lot of components out there. If you look on BitHub, if you look on some of these other sites like Companion, that is, or I should say, BitTorrent is another place that you can find a lot of that stuff too. But it's just the process is slow to build, and you have to have the techs in place to do so. The more we can get people into the open source market and start building apps for this industry, we'll have a lot more.
I won't use it. I won't use open source in my products because I need someone to call. I need someone accountable when this doesn't work. That I can tweet at if I have to, that's going to have marketing yell at somebody about why this isn't getting sorted out. I need somebody accountable. With the problem with open source is that nobody's accountable. There's nobody to call. There's nobody to push on to move something forward. And so I think that a lot of the open source stuff is great, and I think that there's places where it's fantastic, and you get to see stuff in the media production where I'm accountable to somebody for the result. I don't want to have something that I don't want to have any part of my chain be something that someone's not accountable for it. Next question. We're running out of time. We're going to start speeding up.
Interestingly enough, it's on almost the same subject. Tony Denson says, I'm running OBS on an M1 Mac. I assume there are good reasons why 9 months on, there's still no native support. Is it to do with being open source?
Yes. So, and it has to also to do with the fact that it is, it's an edge, the Mac is an edge platform for OBS. It's not, the vast majority of folks that use OBS are on the PC. Leland, real quick, we're running out of time.
Yep, I'll just leave a link to the forum on that exact topic. They are looking to work on it, but there is no open encoding link to the M1 yet, just the Intel support.
Next question.
Tony Dennison is back. I'm running, something skipped on me. So Stan Chan of Roseville. Microsoft is introducing RTMP streams direct to services like YouTube and Twitch with high quality audio. Does that change anything versus Zoom?
it pushes everything forward. But I don't think Microsoft's caught up, but I think they're definitely working really hard at it. I think that Microsoft has an enormous focus on this. Now, I think they don't need to be competitive with Zoom one-to-one. They need to be good enough that their corporate clients are happy using 365. So that's a different level that they have to work at. I think that they did seed this. I mean, Skype was so far out ahead of everyone else for so long, and it was just mismanaged to a point where, I won't even put it on my computer anymore. Go ahead, Rupert.
And Microsoft already has quite a comprehensive RTMP pipeline between Teams and Microsoft Stream and one of their other platforms. So this is maybe just a supplementary thing for them.
They are adding a lot, though. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's either here or coming to Teams that is going to be aimed at broadcast, and they've talked about some of those things in the past. So it is something that's important for Zoom to think about, is like, especially when you see what we're doing with Office Hours 2.0, at some point that will be easier to do in Teams than Zoom at the current trajectory, for us, because Teams is moving faster towards broadcast, kind of what I would quote unquote F1 solutions to, that's kind of my generalized, like, you can do crazy things with it. Teams is moving more towards that than Zoom is. Zoom is opening up, NDI helps, and other things, are slowly opening up, but Zoom's not opening up as fast as Teams, related to that, that process. Teams is further behind Zoom, but the trajectory is that Teams will pass Zoom, I think sometime in the spring, at the current trajectory of both of them. So that's what all of us have to keep tracking. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania says, I have Glyde-Cam type stabilizers gone the way of incandescent light bulbs, or are there good reasons to use one over the modern electronic gimbal? For example, smoother rotation control, battery-free operation, things like that.
Go ahead, Stuart.
And we'll see if this works. No, they haven't gone the way of the dinosaurs, but it also depends on the mass of the camera. On a small light camera, or like a camcorder or a DSLR or a phone, it is much easier to use a gimbal for stabilization. But when you start talking about large cinema cameras, you actually get to the point where you've got to carry the mass, and the Glyde-Cams and the Steadicams will carry that mass a lot better, and it will spread it onto the operator's body better. But also they allow for a gimbal type rig on the head of a Steadicam, so you can do rotation effects. And so you end up with an extra controller. It depends on the mass of the camera and the application.
It also depends on the quality of the operator. So what a gimbal does is it lets a very, very average operator produce a really, really good shot. Not a great shot, not a high tech, so my brother is actually a local 600 Steadicam operator with a Trinity rig, which is the gimbal that Stuart was talking about. And that's I don't know how much that is. It's $150,000 rig or something like that. That is, that the total rig or whatever. And he does high precision shots for film. Like, that's what he does. I want this to look, I want to come out of this person's hand, over this thing, around the table, and everything's almost to the pixel of what it needs to look like as it goes through. And there's lots of rehearsal, and there's an operator that can make that happen. That's very different than I want to have a smooth shot going through a house, and so, and there's things you can do with a gimbal that you can't do with a Steadicam, so on and so forth. But so for scaling everybody's average quality, the gimbal is amazing. And there's many Steadicam shots that I could have done with a gimbal, and there's many Steadicam shots I have done with a gimbal. But when you wanted the real quality, a good Steadicam operator can't be replaced. Courtney, real quick, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, the main difference is the Steadicam and the Glyde-Cam are controlled by the operator's hand actually on the camera itself, whereas the gimbal is using the motors to control everything, and so to smooth things out. So it's much more precise on the previous.
Next question.
Brent Kruger's back from Minneapolis, and he says, is there a good resource to learn lighting and grip hardware terms? Frequently, I know exactly what type of clamp I think I need, but I don't know what it's called to search for it.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'd recommend watching grip truck breakdowns on YouTube. There's all kinds of tours, and they go through every kind of clamp fitting, everything on the truck. They're really proud of it. So watch plenty of those.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
And the grip company, read their rental catalog.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill?
And just real quick, know that there's also some regionalisms. They'll call one particular type of clamp something more often in one location. West Coast and the East Coast will have a different term for it.
And they'll tell you a different reason that the C47 is a C47. Like everybody has a different story about why a C47 is a C47. So that's the other side of it.
And what is a C47?
It's a clothespin. Next question.
Moving on to Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. Greg Gibson, curious which camera you're using. Color gamma look awesome.
Hey, Andy, thanks for noticing. I'm using actually an older model camera. It's a Sony A7R3. What makes it look really good is it's a full frame camera, and I've got a 50 millimeter f1.4 lens on it, so it gives me that really good bokeh and knocks the background out of focus. For lighting, I just have a couple of Elgato key lights. And one of the nice things about the Elgato lights is I have a little control panel that's right here on my computer. So I can go in and I can dial the color balance and the brightness of the lights as well. So I have two of those. And I typically will run a little bit bluer light. So I'll run a more daylight color on myself. And what that does is that makes my background warm up. So it kind of gives me that nice warm tone in the background.
And that's what happens when a photographer does their video, is everything's just right. It's great. It looks amazing. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather here in the panel, Melbourne, Australia. NDI on a Pi, Raspberry Pi, I guess. Anyone played with this? Looks well featured, and he's got a link to decaffeine.com.
I haven't seen it yet. Is it new? All right, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, it came out a while ago. I got it really intrigued, watched a bunch of the developers' videos, and then I read in the site that it's still beta and he's like, use in production at your own risk. So I was also a beta tester for the Apple TV version, which is by Sienna Mark Gilbert. And I love that. It's $99, but it actually works. And you can use the remote control with the Mac to just hit that Apple TV from across the room, or you can use a web browser to go into it. So for $99, I'd say get something that's proven.
What is that again? For the Apple? Is it for the Apple TV?
The Apple TV. It's called Sienna NDI Monitor is the name of it, and it's $99. But you can put it on as many Apple TVs as you want. So to me, that's a way better. Like, it's solid. Especially I use it with a Discovery server, and it works every single time. It's flawless.
That's great. Stuart, real quick.
Guy, can that surf to web pages and output a screen that you can key in vMix? Because that's what I'm actually trying with the Pi at the moment. Grabbing our live timing feed back from a web page where it's displayed on, so I can overlay it on the drag racing stream.
So you want to output a browser over NDI?
Well, yeah, because the live timing is displayed on the 1320 Go website. So we send the timing data from a computer that's sitting just a short distance from me up to the 1320 Go site, so everybody can see it. But I can also overlay that web page on the live stream as well.
One of the things we're going to talk about that we touched on yesterday with Amazon is the fact that Amazon, in the Amazon cloud now, you can take an HTML5 page and composite it in the cloud over top of your video. And we had to do timing recently, and I thought that would have been really useful. Go for a race. Go ahead, David.
I believe there's a Sienna browser that will do NDI native output. I have resources at home. I'll Discord.
Next question.
Next one comes from our friend George Kennedy. George asks, how are you using Blackmagic Design's Teranex AV in your workflow, Alex? He's considering adding it as part of his streaming flypack.
I always have a Teranex. Like always have one, at least one. Sometimes I have 10 or 15 of them, but they are, but always have one in the system so that I can do frame conversions. It also lets me put in time code and there's a variety of other things that I may do with it, but I almost always have a Teranex somewhere in the system that's going to allow me to make adjustments. I need to adjust the audio. I need to adjust the color a little bit. I need to do a lot of other things like that. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, we're using it because we want a 4K workflow to a Blackmagic Video Assist 12G. And so we need that Teranex to break it down into 1080p signals so that we can send that around to the rest of the plant or the house. In this case, it's a recital hall and a concert hall, so that we can monitor it, and also to get it to the encoder. We're using Ajaz.
Absolutely. Next question.
Tony Denson's up next again. He says, I run tech for a church. We stream services via Zoom, but often have pretty bad quality problems. I'm fairly confident it's not a bandwidth problem. We have 50 megabits up and down, or down, and 5 megabits up. But if I stream via Twitch or YouTube, the quality is excellent. Suggestions.
Go ahead, Rupert.
So if your viewers, your participants are joining via Zoom, then that would depend on your account. By default, your account is going to have 360p unless you have some way to boost it up to 720. So but 5 meg is still a little tight, I'd say.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, would using a 2FA on a Zoom account cause issues with production workflows?
Go ahead, Rupert.
If your participants or your contributors aren't familiar with using 2FA, then it could trip you up. If they are familiar with it and they are comfortable with it, then I would always suggest that they use it. For ZoomISO or OSC, I need to check with Andy specifically on that pipeline. But if you are a Zoom admin and have access to a control panel for a whole bunch of Zoom accounts, definitely have 2FA on that.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Suggestions for my first follow focus system. 1 or 2 channel system for controlling remote camera focus. A budget solution would be preferred unless high value option is available.
Good, Carl.
So the E-Image Horizon 1, it's 150. Let me just bring up the slide for you. We go there. So budget, this is not bad, 150. Once you get to 250, you got a lot more features with these type of things, but this would be the budget one to start out with, a single channel, and it comes with the rod, so everything you see it comes with.
I think, doesn't Teradek make the ones that we've used are pretty expensive, and the more budget ones that we've used are the Red Rock Micros, which that worked well for us. They're slower, slightly less bits available, so your resolution isn't quite as high. That's what you get into, is you want to look at the resolution of the transmit, because lower resolution means it's a lower number of steps between what it can actually do. So those are the things you start paying attention to. Of course, on the high end, you have Preston's are kind of the standard. We've used a lot of Red Rock Micros. I think that the Teradek makes one that I haven't gotten to test yet. That I think, or it might be small rig, but it's one of that group. But I haven't tested them. But I hear that they're good. And Teradek generally makes a lot of that stuff in that area. Tends to be technically very good. Next question.
Nate Smith, Grand Rapids, Michigan. With almost universal HEVC support, is it time to start delivering content on HEVC, or should we all stick with H.264?
The biggest problem with HEVC is Microsoft. It is a world of hurt to try to send HEVC to Microsoft, the Microsoft platform in general. To send HEVC to the Apple platform is nothing. Like the AV Foundation player just goes, "Oh, I got it," and it just decides what it's going to do. Microsoft, because because they haven't bought the HEVC license for the platform, it's hard. Just let it. This is what I deal with every day. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, as Alex said, you've got to deliver into the most widely accepted format, and you're cutting out more than half the world if you do H.265.
It's not just that it's hard; it's just that for the user to get it working, they have to know what they're doing. Like, there's no accidental way that a user uses HEVC on a Windows platform. They build it into it. Now, the reality is it's getting built into a lot of things like the PlayStation and the Xbox, and those types of things are starting to get more and more. So those areas are going to go well. Apple TVs and some of the TV players are gonna handle HEVC, but the Windows platform is the big metal weight that against HEVC right now. Next question.
Nick Bad in the UK, looking for a cost-effective way to run remote vMix instance connections. Currently using RDP, but wisdom suggests better not to. What are my options for occasional use? Do not want another monthly subscription.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
So one of the things that I've been using is a virtual terminal called Nice DCV. It's actually a product that I think Amazon owns it now, and they're developing it. And initially, Nice was a little quirky, but they've made some improvements to it. One of the really nice benefits about Nice is that it's free, so there's no additional cost for using it. and you have the ability in NICE to actually set your screen resolution. So you can either tell it to spread across all the displays that you have on your system, or let's say that you just have a laptop computer and you've only got access to one screen. You can actually go into NICE and use the command line interface, and you can tell NICE that I only want I want 3 by 1080. So you can actually have NICE create a window that has 3 1080 screens on it. You can minimize that, shrink it down, and then you can use the scroll bars to actually scroll across it. So like, for example, if you're doing Zoom pins, you could run Zoom inside of that, and you could pin to one of those screens, and your NDI software is still going to see that as a source. So your screen capture is still going to see those individual screens that NICE creates as sources, and you'll be able to pull those into your switching software and use those in production.
Great answer. It's nice to have you here, Greg. So that's fantastic. Next question.
Tom Guariello in Princeton says, and this one's got a lot of options here, looking for a Zoom or hybrid, in-person or remote, hardware or process consultant in New York City for the graduate program I teach in. Any suggestions?
We're going to get better about ways to do job postings inside of Discord because it's starting to be something we're all trying to find each other. But if anyone knows anybody, go ahead, Rupert.
I think this just presents one of the challenges of doing hybrid or in person. You suddenly need people on the ground close to your event. If you're fully remote, you need fewer people locally, and you can pull resources in from anywhere to help with your remote production.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Stan Chan's back from Roseville. With Verizon recently implemented RCS, a more secure messaging protocol to replace SMS with 473 million users. Why is Apple the only holdout if they believe in security?
Well, iMessages is pretty secure between itself. It's just the SMS that is unsecure. I don't think Apple's not, their business model is not how to be more opened. Like that's not really that's not how they operate. So I would be surprised if they open that up. It's just easier beyond the business model. It's easier to fix things when you're not interrelated with other folks. So I think that it's Apple will continue to probably be more of an island than less of an island, especially as, you know, and admittedly, folks, like I don't know how most Apple users experience it about green bubbles versus blue bubbles. But usually if someone's got a green bubble, I usually find another platform to talk to them on. You know, like I just use Signal or Messenger or something. Like I just don't use and I don't know whether that's the case for everyone, but I just know that for me, there's like 3 people in the world that I talk to with the green bubble. You know, like, you know, and not very often, you know, normally it's all because they're available somewhere else, and I just use the other somewhere else. Go ahead, Rupert.
I mean, SMS was due for an update anyway. It may be on iPhone, who knows, that they will use this new protocol for the SMS side, the green bubbles, but the iMessage stuff will still go to iMessage.
They would have to see it. Right now, it's very popular in the world, but Verizon just adopted it. It hasn't rolled out yet in mass in the United States. If it Apple will change if it really is surrounded by lots of people who want to play some other way. Most Apple users just don't care. Like that's the problem, is their own market doesn't really care. Like, you know, in mass. So there's a couple of us that technically care about it, but I think we overestimate how the average person views it. So, and so we cut off, I just want to acknowledge that I cut off a bunch of other questions because we're going to jump into the next hour. Generally, one of the things I'm starting to do just for those watching is that if we get to the end of the hour, instead of going over or getting into an overly rush, if I see a bunch of questions that are at 1 or 0, you know, like 1 vote or 0 votes, I'm probably just going to clear them rather than trying to leave no question left behind, just so our producers know that if I don't see votes on something, if there's votes of 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever, I'll probably try to get to them. But if we're getting to the end of the hour and we're at a cutoff point and I see just a bunch of 1s and 0s, I'm just going to knock them out and move on to the next hour. So this problem will continue to get worse as the producer group gets bigger. So I'm just acknowledging that's kind of how I've been thinking about it for, you know, a while. So we're going to start off the conversation a little bit of just around the table discussion about how we approach C-Suite, this is, we'll talk about for the next 10 minutes. If you have questions around C-Suite while we're talking, go ahead and throw them into Makana as you're listening. And so, that's been a little bit of background is that, I worked on a lot of live streams for a variety of companies. And by the last 3 or 4 years, last 3 years, all I did before I closed PixelCore, all I did was C-Suite and world leaders. Like that's all I did is interact with, and that was my specialty within the company. So we just had enough of it and it was specialized enough that it's the only shows I worked on. And so they have their own ecosystem, and I thought that it would be worth for people who haven't done that, have a discussion about, what the idiosyncrasies are with working at that level. I think that one of the things that we always have to come into, a lot of us want to have really high quality, you want to have a lot of time, you want to have a lot of those things. And at that level, at the C-suite level, you have to remember that these people are getting paid an enormous amount of money. And every minute is expensive, like really expensive, and they have to make a lot of decisions very quickly, and they can make them however speed they want, but your access to them is very limited. And I think that a lot of times what people don't get when they get in, you do a really good job, and eventually what happens is you graduate until you're meeting with, if you keep doing virtual events really well, you're going to get to C-suite productions, like where you're working with executives to do that. And you have to be conscious that the entire gear system changes, as you get into that atmosphere. Like you're in a different, there's just a lot different way of being that's required, or you don't stay there very long. So and you come across as rough. So one of the things that, and since no one's raising their hand, I'll just keep talking for a little bit, and then we'll go to questions. But some of the things to think about are, you don't say more than you need to. I think people can be very conversational, especially when they're nervous, and you're just, they're not. The thing about C-suite is they will not generally, in a large corporation, a C-suite executive will not push back on you directly. Like they're not going to sit there and, cut you off or whatever. They'll just nod and then they'll go, okay, that was a great question. No matter what you said, they're going to say something that's politically safe for them to say. They're very conscious of, how they appear to everyone in that piece. They may never want to work with you again and not respond to you again and not, or tell their assistant, let's not do it, work with that person again, but it's not going to come back to you directly. So you have to be super conscious of how you occur for them. And one of the things is that that you give them the information that they need in the least number of words, in the least number of amount of information. That B, you provide stability, that you are on time, you have the information that they need, you don't miss deadlines, you don't, like there's a whole bunch of things that you have to, kind of work with there to create lots and lots of foundation around it, because everyone's concerned that it's not going to work. Go ahead, Ken, and then Chris.
It's just a translation for C-suite for non-Americans. It's meaning chief executive. Yes.
It's not just chief executives, but it would be C-suite in general is a term for the vice presidents. You say maybe direct, depending on the company's infrastructure, the directors and above. Directors, the vice president, senior vice president, and then the obviously the chief executives. Those are the folks. Good question. Go ahead, Chris.
I think one of the things that you need to do is you need to follow somebody else's lead. There have been times when I work with people where they absolutely won't let me anywhere near somebody who's a decision maker. Oh, about your comment about, they won't push back to you. They'll just disappear you out the back door. Yeah. But one time, several years ago, I had a guy ask me to come to Atlanta to work with him on a project, and 2 producers traveled with me. And when we got there, he's like, I don't need you guys. And he pulled me aside, and he and I worked together for 3 days on a presentation. And the producers, I had no idea what they were doing. They weren't invited. And it was a privilege to spend that time with them. And then at the end of the day, it's like, let's go get a steak. And, you know, we're off to Ruth's Chris and stuff like that. And, but you need to follow their lead. They will open up, they will make things as casual or as buttoned down as they want it to be. But when you get that access, you just have to be,
and it's not just them, it's also everyone around them. You know, they have a support staff that is there.
Their protectors will definitely be that bubble, but sometimes they just go, yeah, back off. Come on.
They will, but the main thing is that you also don't want to try to step over that, because the folks that support them are, you know, it's important to them. They don't want to lose control, not because they're trying to hang on to their job or anything else, but because their job there is to make that person's job easier. And if you get between that and start having lots of conversations with them that they don't see, it's harder for them to be accountable for what they're really accountable for. And the executive assistants for, especially at the companies, when you get into the like Fortune 10, they could be CEOs, you know, like for companies, like they, you know, they're not like an exec, you know, they're not you know, someone just got out of college. You know, these are folks that are very high powered, you know, and manage a lot of people and a lot of conversations incredibly powerfully. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, most of everything that Alex is saying, I've found to be exactly the same. My number one rule when I'm working with a CEO or somebody, don't get in their head in a way that pulls them out of where they are. You want to leave them focused. And that means reducing all the external confusion away to nothing. If you're comfortable with them and they're comfortable with you, which is even more important, keep that focus and then just guide them. Their first take is always fabulous. It's comfortable. I'm smiling. I'm happy. You're bringing positive energy to this moment so they can relax and not think that anything is going outside of their control or wrong. Even if it is, you got to provide that wall and make sure they're in the moment with you, and then everything will go smoothly.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, and don't ever present problems. If there's a circumstance, give options, you know, and do some of that work for them, and just lay it out and give them choices.
Things being tidy helps. You know, like if we have an event where we're going to bring a executive into a location to, you know, a lot of times what happens is at a large company, we'll be given a space where the CEO or someone else is going to come in and do their presentation or be part of the event, and we build that all up. We don't just build it up. We build it up, we clean it up, we make sure that all the cables are exactly where they need to be. They're just so. We cut off the ability to see anything that could be a distraction. So we pipe and drape everything into a box so that they're not distracted by anybody else. You know, we try to think, and a lot of times I'll sit, you know, for the executive ones, if I'm managing them, I'll sit where they're going to sit if I'm allowed to. So sometimes that gets you in trouble. I was once sitting in Conan O'Brien's seat, and he walked in and he goes, "Go ahead, insert yourself." You know, and anyway, so so but the reason I sit in these things is that you're trying to figure out from their point of view what's missing. Like I'll sit down in the chair of where they're going to talk, and I just look and I go, okay, that's a little crooked. This doesn't look quite right. I can't quite see this. There's a little bit of glare over here. I can see this weird crack that makes me uncomfortable. So I let my OCD run free, you know, like, and I just sit there and I sit in their chair and I try to think about them having to do what they're doing. And I just try to tighten up all the little bits and pieces that are going to, you know, so that, because that how it feels when they're in there makes a huge difference in how it occurs for them. And it, you know, and this is not just C-suite, this is all talent, is that talent is this, it's a very, very fragile thing. You know, being present in general is a fragile thing, you know, and so when you get someone a little distracted, when they're a little frustrated, when they're a little whatever, that when they get off, now they're in front of thousands of people off. You know, and so how do you get them on? You know, and a lot, like for instance, when we do builds, we always want to build, we want them to come and sit down hours before, even for 5 minutes, and just tell us if everything's okay. You know, because they'll tell us, oh, I don't like this, and this. I wish this was this way. I wish this was that way. And then we can do something about it. They can't tell us that 20 minutes before and have us fix it for the show. But if they walk in for an hour, a walkthrough the day before or the morning of or whatever, and give us some feedback, we can fix a lot of things. The other thing is that we write down everything that they ask for. so that the next time that we do it with them, they don't have to ask for it. You know, so if they like water a certain way, if their assistant brings it in and they do a certain thing, we pay attention to that. If they like coffee a certain way, we pay attention to that. If they ask anything they ask for once, they should never have to ask for again. You know, and these are the little details that keep you in business, is paying attention to all of those little details and having notes of every person that you're working with and making sure that they get exactly what they want when they want it and into every little detail that you can. And then try to think ahead of what they might want later. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then Greg.
I find that the biggest thing is the greeting. How you greet with the person is very important. I know post COVID, you don't do handshakes too much anymore. But I remember going to Qualcomm and meeting the CEO of Qualcomm. And that's when I really learned about the whole card exchange. If you give them a card, because from Asia, when you give somebody a card, you give them with two hands facing like this. And if you understand the intricacies of each area and knowing the person that you're going to be meeting, you'll get a better rapport just from that opening greeting.
Yeah. Good, Greg.
I was just going to say, Alex, I work with a lot of C-suite executives and members of Congress, cabinet secretaries. One of the things that always astounds me is how few of them, even at this point in time, actually get it. Oh, yeah. And I've had a few executives on who they're getting good advice. They understand the importance of, as Jeff Wigrin, I heard him say a while back that the new elements of the three-piece suit are lights, camera, and audio. And some of them are getting that advice, but some of them aren't. You know, I had the CEO of a major airline on a while back, and he looked horrible, and he actually participated in Tech Check, and we went through it, and I gave him some advice. But the bottom line is with these guys is in the end, they're going to do things the way they want to do them, and you can make suggestions and you can push a little, but in the end, you're only going to get so far with them, and it either matters to them or it doesn't. Yep. And it just constantly surprises me at the bad advice or how little some of these how little effort some of these folks are putting into their on-camera presentation.
Well, it's also one of the reasons it's so important for us, as even if we're not on a public thing, the better our camera looks, the more they see the delta. You know, and you know, like you're gonna say, Greg.
I want to support what you're saying, because one of the reasons that whenever I'm working with somebody like that, this is the setup that I use. Yep. And I often will get comments or feedback from them. Typically you have to kind of set the bar, right? So you've got to lead by example. And so you look good, you sound good. And there's also peer pressure. So typically, like I do very few, just because of my use case and some of the clients that I work with, I don't often get the chance to do the one-on-one direct tech check where we're going to spend 30 minutes and we're going to look at like 20 different locations and we're going to find everything that's, a lot of times I get people on 30 minutes before the program and I got to make those things work.
Yeah.
But what I find sometimes in the group tech check is peer pressure does matter. And so you get a group of executives on and somebody looks really good and somebody sounds really good. It's kind of like the thing where people will come on and they'll go like, "Hey Jim, are you going to wear a tie and a jacket and a tie?" And then their camera goes dark and they come back with a jacket and a tie on. So sometimes peer pressure is your friend in that situation.
And a lot of times what we do is we send a kit out and people, I don't need the kit. I do this all the time. And we're like, okay, well, everybody else has a kit. Like, we just want to make sure you're clear. And we just want you to know that everyone else is going to look at a certain level, and we just don't want you to be embarrassed. Like that's like that you don't look the way that they do. And then if they go in however they're going to go in, and if they look bad, they'll never do that again. And we look at it at some point. You can't push any harder. I'll come to you and Brant next, but Greg, one more time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just whenever I hear the words "don't worry, I do this all the time."
Oh my gosh.
Major red flag.
Yes,
major red flag. And I swear I am going to have a t-shirt made that on the front of it says, "Don't worry, I do this all the time." And on the back, it's going to be, "Sorry, you're on mute."
Yeah. Go ahead, Brant.
Yeah, a couple quick things. You guys hit so many great points right there. One of the things that I'll touch on that, Alex, you've mentioned many times, is just sneaking up on them. So when you get that "I do this all the time" person, just, "Oh yeah, and you look amazing." but, can we just try, what if we just get that camera a little bit? Oh, now you look even better, just sneaking up on whether it's your chisel analogy or sneaking up on a cow or whatever. And then
the cows are hard to sneak up on. Horses are easier. They usually move really slow. Anyway, go ahead.
That's all right. And then the other one that I wish it wasn't true, but it doesn't make it any less true, is that different executives will react differently to different people and different genders. And so some of the producers that I've worked with, the female producers, they'll say something, great advice, and get totally ignored. I'll say exactly the same thing, and oh yeah, that's a good idea. And so we would just have like nonverbal cues of like, hey, can you just say that again type things. And so even on calls with Zoom, we'll frequently have a gender balance of having a male and female producer on. And if one person's not getting any leeway, not getting any grace, not getting any feedback, that's working, we'll just have a quick jump in the chat, say, hey, can you try it? And go for a while. And they'll just, and it goes both ways. Like some people just react better to different types of folks.
And the other thing that we get into that is, that we're careful of is not pushing too hard. At some point, you just can't make them look any better, and it's only going. You realize that they're not going to do what you want them to do, or their space isn't set up for that, and you have to know when to stop, because you know that you could get more out of it, but they have a busy schedule, and if they give you a 30-minute window, if a C-suite gives you a 30-minute window, you've got 30 minutes. Do not go into 35, 40, 45 minutes to get some little area in the corner fixed. It's just not going to happen. Unless you can talk to their assistant later and say, it'd be really great if we fix this. They get super stressed about their schedule getting moved into, we ran over we had a pretty high level government one in Washington, DC, and we ran 4 minutes over, and people were really upset that we ran 4 minutes over. So you just have to be very, very careful. Go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, we're about to prep nearly 65 speakers for the Public Health Institute event, which includes doctors, lawyers, attorney generals, judges, and as high as possibly the Secretary State General's position. So you have to remember they're people too. We have the same emotions and the same stress levels that they do, and we have to deal with them on a personal level. We can't just walk in here and treat them like a robot or a talent card that's going to be standing in the corner. We have to approach them kind of with kid gloves sometimes to make sure that we're not pushing them too hard, like Alex says. And we found more often than not, if you come in with a smile and you let them see how well you look and sound and can tell them, look, I'm just here to make you look good and make you sound as best as possible. Let me do my job to help you get there. You can usually relax the tensions a lot.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I'm going to talk from a photography's point of view. This is where I've done most of my stuff with executives. I'm given maybe 60 seconds to 5 minutes maximum with them. That's all I've got. Literally 60 seconds. They'll come in front of my camera for 60 seconds and then they're gone. Their minus will take them away after 60 seconds. So 2 things. I found not using silver light stands, using black light stands is better. Putting everything on batteries, no cables, because you never know which direction they're going to come in from. They'll trip over your cables. So I have everything on batteries for those kind of things. Nothing's on the floor except for the light stands, and they're black light stands. I found that one out. And I'll set up light stands in a way that in groups. So if I want different lighting, I'm never going to move a light. I'm going to put up a third light stand that's on a different group. And then on my camera or my flash on my camera, I'm going to switch it to group A and group B to get different kind of lighting. They don't have to move. I don't have to move. I don't have to move a light. I just switch the groups and it changes the complete lighting in the room. They'll never know because it's just a flash for them. But I can get like 3 or 4 different lighting setups while they're sitting in the one spot and they don't have to move an inch. But they won't even know because all I'm doing is changing the grips on the flash. Then I can get 4 different setups in 60 seconds and then they're out.
Go ahead, Josh, and then David.
So you think that, when someone comes in and they see how different they are to everybody else and they get the peer pressure, you think it's going to work, but then you get a repeat offender and they come back and they do it again. And you get the impression maybe they didn't see it. Is there a good way to where we could maybe bring that reflection up to them? Is it a way that we can give the feedback or maybe a preview, just like, here, look, take a look at this or present it to them?
It's what we find is that there are some people that just won't see it or don't care. The executive assistants are the people that you want to talk to about that. Like that's they're the ones that's the whisper group that you talk to. Well, and it has to be, it can't be apoplectic. Like, oh my gosh, that didn't work. It just be like, little that audio was a little rough, and people are gonna, and then you make the point that People will listen to you. Like just when you wear a suit, people will listen to you more. When you have great audio and great video, you have more authority. And so as an executive, usually you want more authority. And so usually you want the quality of the audio and the video to be higher. And you say that kind of stuff to the executive assistants, not necessarily to the executive themselves. And that kind of, that also helps a fair bit. Go ahead, David.
Two things. If you're early, you're on time. And if you're on time, you're late. And in the role of a support personnel, be the Kuroko, the guy in all black in the background that nobody knows or doesn't be seen, but get stuff done.
Yeah, you're so right. And one of the things we joke that if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you're fired. You know, and so you do have to think through that. The other thing is don't be too early. So when you're working on stuff, to be early, like, so if I tell a client I'm going to be somewhere, like especially a high-end client like that, I will not be more than 5 minutes early. Now that means that I'm at a Starbucks for an hour and a half beforehand. Like if I'm coming from far away, you know, I'll be at a Starbucks for that's a block away that I can control how long it's going to take me to get there. But I will not show up early because that's another thing that they have to manage. Like they weren't ready. They were in some other meeting. They're managing something else. Me showing up 10 minutes or 15 minutes early is a hardship for them. And if you show up early all the time, I've been on the inside when someone shows up early and you're like, oh my gosh, they're 15 minutes early. Like, you know, and it just creates stress, you know, and so you don't want to be late, but you don't want to be too early because you're just now another particle that someone has to, you know, that someone has to manage. Let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Sure. The next one comes up from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, if you're working with talent that is inexperienced, would a Mickey style meter still be appropriate if you can coach them on how it works?
Go ahead, Bill.
Oh my God, no. I do not want them looking at a meter. That's the last thing in the world. No. Yeah. I want to be them present. I don't want them doing anything technical. Yeah. This is a relationship. It's not measurement.
Yeah, we'll gently basically just say, hey, can you move this up a little bit, or let's bring you down. Now, I admit that 90%, 95% of ours now, we send them a computer. So we have even our small kits are a Mac Mini. And they have a USB pre, they have headset and some little lights. And we've stopped asking them to do anything. You know, like they just, you know, like they turn the computer on, we VPN in and immediately, you know, take over, you know, what we need to take over to make that work. And we've just stopped asking them to do much, because now that doesn't work for everyone. You have people that come in that are ad hoc, and then you do have to make those. But yeah, I would do it more subtly and know that it's not always going to get it right. That's also why we like to do our version of where we put everybody in their own Zoom room, is because we control their audio. Like they just have to come in cleanly, and we can even it out later. And that's the big advantage of a system like what we use, is to be able to have ISO audio. Next question.
Roscoe Jones is up next, and he says, how do you choose makeup artists, and are most C-suites open to looking their best on camera?
Go ahead, Bill. You're muted.
I'm sorry. We have done that with CEOs. I have to tell you, always, we put them in a separate room away from all their people. I have never done makeup on an executive in front of their crew. I know it's more acceptable than it's ever been before, but if there's even a hint that their people are going to smile or smirk or something, oh, you're getting makeup done. No, it's private. I'd love to have them come in and do that, but it's entirely away from everybody else.
The only thing that we may do is the you know, when we're passing through a lot of people for something, we may de-shine them, you know, with, you know, something like mattify.
Absolutely.
You know, while they're sitting down, because the person's sitting there and you just go in and just knock off some shine. And different people have different opinions about that. A lot of male executives, female executives are generally all made up the way they want to be made up, for the most part. Artists, we once, I won't say who it is, but she's been in the news recently. Her makeup was $20,000 for one show. Anyway, Roscoe,
how would you do a local hire though if the executive is far away for that makeup artist?
We find local makeup artists. I mean, you know, like we have a network of folks that we talk to about, like, where can we find a makeup artist? We know makeup artists in a lot of locations. I admit that a lot of times for high profile ones, we'll send the makeup artist that we, you know, the nearest one that we know already. You know, in DC, we have, you know, DC, New York, LA, we have strong makeup San Francisco, we have strong makeup artists. They're not only very good, they're not conversational. You know, that's one of the problems with makeup artists is small talk. And that's in general with our crew. If I see you, if I'm in a room and I see you talking to if someone in my crew, other than the people that have to talk to the C-suite, you know, to the executive, is talking to the executive about anything other than where not to trip, they'll never be on the show, never be on that crew again. Like I am like brutal about it. Like I tell everyone, don't get into small talk. Don't get into, they're not interested in you. Even if they're nodding and smiling, not interested. You know, like, and even if they sound like it, not interested. Like you need to treat it that way. Like they're not, like you just have to know where you are in the food chain. And if you're not the producer talking to them, you're not in that part of the food chain. Like, and if they initiate it and start making small talk, have small talk with them, but otherwise do not initiate small talk as a crew member. That is a surefire way to never be invited back, you know, and nothing will happen. You'll never know that it happened. This executive will smile. The producer will not say anything, you know, nothing will happen. You'll just never get that call back again, you know, and that's you know, because it's just, you're now dangerous, you know, to everyone that's related to it. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Alex, just to kind of reinforce that point, you know, don't interject yourself into their conversation either. So if you're doing a session and you're in sort of your green room mode before an event starts and the executives are having a conversation, get in. We used to have this saying, get in, get out quick, nobody gets hurt. So get in, get what you need to do done. Yeah. And then, you know, don't interject yourself into their conversation, because they'll be nice to you, to your face, but they really don't care about what you have to say. So.
Yeah, I know it sounds really rough, but it's just that you know, a lot of people, we've had a lot of people who think, well, they finally have access to this executive. This is going to be their one-time chance to give them the idea that they had forever about what that company should really be doing. And you just need to know that unless they ask you for that information, it's not really appropriate. You know, like, and again, you just got to, the term in our business is stay in your lane. You know, like, you know, and manage that. Go ahead, Chris.
I was on a show once and we were walking in a hallway with Bill Gates, and I watched somebody who was completely not appropriate turn to him and he said, "Hey, so Bill, how do I manage a script if I add a 2-column script?" And he got into this thing, and Bill turned to him and he goes, "You should use tables." And I got to say, it was completely inappropriate conversation for this guy to initiate, but Bill's response was perfect.
Yeah. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah. You know, and the other thing too is you've got a job to do. So don't be afraid to interject yourself when you have to, but do it as needed. You know, so for example, it's your job to keep things running on time. These guys aren't looking at the clock before an event starts. And so they may be chatting and maybe they're talking about content, but at some point you got to get the show started. So when you need to jump in and tell people that, give people their cues and get the ball rolling, then you've got to be, you can't be hesitant to interject.
And the other thing though, is that when you are going to do that, when you need to provide something, think about it. Like I had a very high level world leader that I had to give instructions to of how you're going to get onto the stage, you know, in India. You're going to go through here, you're going to come around here. This is how the show's going to go. And I get 45 seconds to give him that information. And he walks in and he just looks straight at you and he's like, you know, what are we doing here? You know, and then you just go, you know, like, and you give it to him but they'll remember it all. Like folks who do stage stuff all the time, but I practiced that for an hour. like to figure out exactly what I was going to say so that it was perfectly clear, so that it would, you know, so it would work, you know, and then off they go. But you have to be very, very conscious too. You have a very small amount of time. There's a bunch of people looking at you and you need to know what you're going to say and say it well and clearly the first time. Next question.
Next question comes from Sky Gleason. Actors, entertainers understand their appearance and performance is their product. What tips are there to help a non-performer executive be comfortable in front of a camera?
Go ahead, Josh.
I think we mentioned some of the things already. First, by example. So we can set a good example, and peer pressure didn't stop at high school. So if they can see, if we have an example to showcase what other people are doing, what other people are looking, we can they'll be more open for us to give them advice to how they can improve their image.
Yeah, go ahead. A couple other things from just a show perspective. One of the things we people will say, okay, he's going to ask all the questions, or the executive is going to run the conversation, and we will almost always tell them not to do that. Like, do not put them in that position. They are not a host. They are an executive. You want someone who's managing the questions and managing the conversation that we can rehearse with. The big thing is you want a host that's available for you for hours, so you can figure out, because the most important part of every show, like many other things, is how do you get in and how do you get out? So what is your, how are you, so you want to practice that that infill and the exfill very, very carefully so that you understand it. Once you get into the show, you're kind of moving along, but having that host also means that I have an IFB with that host, that I can sit there and I can pull things and move things and turn things. Having the talent have to run the show creates two minds. And what you want to do is do everything you can for the talent to have one mind, which is just be present and respond to what is coming towards you. So part of it is structural, is to do things where there's people around you in the show that are going to allow you to just be you, because they became that executive because of who they are, how they approach it, but don't make them be the host, because that's not what they're practiced to do. And it makes them very uncomfortable. Go ahead, Rupert.
In terms of being comfortable in front of the camera, teleprompter, get them to naturally look at the camera.
Maybe. Teleprompter for what we do to talk to someone.
Right,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of the things that I always try to figure out structurally is how do we get away from them reading a teleprompter, because unless you do it all the time, you don't do it well. And everyone thinks they do. Oh, we'll do a teleprompter. They have a exact script that they want to talk to and everything else. And you're like, look, it's just going to look really stale. And you just warn people that unless someone is really, really good at it, they're better off being a little off the cuff, having more conversation than trying to say something specific. Go ahead, Bill.
And unless it's a panel thing, you have no business doing this interview unless you've studied who you're talking to. You will find things that they are interested in. And if you're lucky, you get an admin from their side who will really,
if you're the host,
give you a couple little hints. And they'll say, all they've been talking about is share price in the meetings for hours. And so if you can just toss off, hey, congratulations, your share price is up a little, as a toss off, they will suddenly get way more comfortable, because that's the moment they've been in. You might be able to start a little dialogue with them about that. And even on the other side, not out of C-suite, you're talking about individuals, the same thing. I mean, what are they passionate about? If I have somebody who's like crazy about pets, I'll start talking about my pets just to put them in that comfort mode, and then move that into.
But you have to be really careful with that. Like really careful. That's a really dangerous conversation. That's a dangerous thing to do if you're not careful, because that gets into they're not interested in talking about it if you don't hit it right on the mark.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you get that from the admin that this is their passion. Their passion is old cars.
I'd be just careful with that tech. With that. Just be careful. That's all. It's not that you can't do it. Just be careful. The one thing that works remarkably well with one of our DPs that I would not recommend do unless you can do it as well as he can. But the one thing that he would do, and I thought he did it, it seemed original when he first did it. And then after that, every show we did with him, I realized he does it. He'll walk in and go, wow, you look so much better than the photo. And he does that with but I suddenly realized he does that with everybody. He uses it and he says it so authentically that people go, oh yeah. Oh. But it's like, and the way he says it, it's just like, he's just like stunned that they look so much better than they did in the photo that he got when he was planning this thing. And he doesn't say very much about it. And then he just moves on and talks about it. But it was remarkable at how much you could brighten somebody up by just saying that. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you are working with a teleprompter and a prepared speech, one thing for the prompter operator, as soon as that executive enters the room, be at your station, be ready to roll, be at the top of the script, and talk to the audio guy and make sure that you have headphones so that you can hear the executive's microphone all the time, not just faded up right before they say action. Because typically the CEO will sit down, I ask them if the font size is okay for them. That's the only conversation I'll have with them. And I might ask them if they want to rehearse, but I'll have to listen carefully, because a lot of times they'll start reading the prompter. People are doing other stuff, getting ready for the shot, and they'll start reading the prompter under their breath. And you hear that, then you got to start scrolling so that they can do a rehearsal and kind of on the sly. And they appreciate that a lot.
And the other thing is that when you're working at that level, you want a really good teleprompt operator. If they're going to read a teleprompt at this level, this is not one of your interns. This is not you with an extra computer. This is a teleprompt operator that can edit on the fly at the speed that they're asking for it. And you need to have a professional doing that. That is not something that you have the intern work on, because it seems like everyone can buy a $40 teleprompt software now. It used to not be that way. So you had professionals that were doing that. The other thing is that I will always read their teleprompt before them. So I'll sit down and read through the entire teleprompt. I'm not going to change any things, but I'm going to look for grammar, and I'm going to look for spelling, and I'm going to look for weird spacing. And so I'll just go through the whole thing to make sure that their experience is as good as I could make it. And then they'll make changes. Oh, I don't like that word. I don't like that. That's fine. What you don't want is that isn't spelled right, or or the spacing's weird, or I can't, do this thing. So I try to get it to as close as it needs to be. And again, this is another place where we take notes. If an executive says, I really wish that text was smaller, we write down what the text size was. Like when we landed, this person likes 62 points, or this person likes 48 points, or because it's different, but having a professional there, having a good crew, it's a big deal. So go ahead, Greg, and then Josh.
I think it's worth too, like listening to the feedback that you get from them during production or pre-production. I had a retired CEO of a very large company on back last summer when I was very new to doing this, and he actually logged on early. And so there was a period of time when it was just he and I on together, and he immediately starts complaining. And he's complaining about who am I going to be talking to? Where's the audience going to be? I want to see who I'm talking to. And I was like a little nervous because I was fairly new at the whole virtual event thing. And this guy's just complaining. And we were in vMix, and we were streaming to Facebook and YouTube. And so there's really not an audience to see. And I was trying to tell him, well, you're going to see Jason. Jason's going to be the moderator. You and Jason are going to have this conversation. But he was really adamant about, wanting to see who he was talking to. And my takeaway from that is that every event I did after that, I made sure that I had a return feed that I sent back to the presenter so that they could all see each other. So everybody that was in the meeting that's participating on the panel, I make sure that they have a return feed where they can still, even if somebody's full screen, they can always see the people that they're talking to.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, Josh.
And we talked a little bit about it, but for those that aren't used to reading from a teleprompter as far as a script, it might be a good idea to have a teleprompter just so that they can make eye contact, just so that they're more in touch with their audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we call that kind of an interrotron, which is that's the name that Errol Morris gave it. It's been around for a long time, but the interrotron is, and we use that heavily, for folks to have eye-to-eye contact. Go ahead, Brant.
Yeah, no one here would likely ever happen, but we did have an executive once that insisted on running their own teleprompter, and it went just about as well as you can imagine that it went. And then also, I think the A2, the backstage audio tech, is probably one of the most underrated positions in production, because they're frequently the last person that the executive or whoever's going on stage sees and talks to. And so having someone who's really good in that position, that's personable but not too personable, chatty but not too chatty, and hey, you look great right before they go out, that kind of stuff is underrated as far as audio techs go.
There's also a ritual that you do, when you set them down and make sure that they're ready to go. Like, for instance, you have an IFB. Oftentimes we'll put an IFB in. Some political figures won't let us do that, but executives often will, so that they can hear what the other person's talking about, and it'll sound better. One of the things we do very carefully is that the earpiece that's going to go into their ear is in a Ziploc bag, like one of those small Ziplocs, and we take it out and we'll have an A2 that wants to just put it on before they get in. I'm like, no. it's in the Ziploc bag. It's there. It's like you don't crack we don't crack the water until they're there, and you don't, there's things that you do in front of them so that, and again, a lot of this stuff is providing confidence, and making sure that they know what it's going to look like and how it's going to work, and so on and so forth. If you're going to have them set up their own kit, by the way, we do send out kits for executives. Always have them set it up at least a day in advance. you know, and the reason we do that is because it's frustrating for them. And what we want them to do is forget about how frustrating it was and just know how nice it looks the next day, because that frustration will last for hours. And then they'll, you know, it can be, depending on how technical they are, it can last for hours. Sometimes it just gets set up and it's great. But it can be something that you want them to cool off from before they go into the next thing, depending on how big the kit is. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. He says, when dealing with executive directors and boards, how do you convince them when they won't go back and look at broadcasts that their audio is horrible and their lighting makes them look undead?
If they're not going to look back at it, you're looking at the folks surrounding them and just mentioning, like, it would be really good if they, you know, improve this, you know, but that's a quiet conversation to have with their assistants, generally. That argument of the suit and tie, the argument of you have more authority when you look and sound better, those things resonate oftentimes with executives. Go ahead, Roscoe.
If it's a publicly expressed version of themselves, have their spouse look at it. I got a really good one that time.
Yeah, but don't talk to their spouse unless you know them. Next question. Can't hear you, Bill.
Rupert McCrae is up next. He says, from Dallas, is this C-suite moving to the suburbs in the work from anywhere era?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I've run into that a couple of times recently. And I find that people at that level often are pretty well to do. And I've had a couple of them zoom in from their balconies overlooking the valley and things like that. So there is some change in the desire of people at that level to kind of increase their status by doing a little stuff from very nice homes.
I think
that can happen.
I think that the other thing that we see is that it's a much nicer experience. So I think that we're starting to get into this thing where we see people that we're bringing in from their home, and it may be their home, you know, like it's a room that looks like their home. Like literally, for some of the C-suite that we work with, they now have a set in their office that looks like a kitchen or looks like a office that is not, and it's literally for these addresses and for everything else. Like they're coming, they don't have to announce that they're coming from their house. They just show up and it looks like a living room or it looks like whatever, but it's totally managed and it's got a grid and it's got all the things that you want in it. It's beautifully lit. Anyway, so that's already occurring, you know, for and this is like Fortune 10, you know, kind of stuff that room, that is a set, you know, that they're building, you know, into that. But we send out a lot of kits. And I find it far more compelling to see their homes and see the variety and see, you know, if you can make it look good and they have the internet for it. I'm surprised at how people don't have the internet for it, but at that level. But if they have the internet for it, if they have the lighting, if they have those types of things, it's such a compelling thing as a viewer to have it not be a stale corporate, you know, from the office look. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm seeing a lot of people actually coming in from their like vacation homes. You know, when COVID first hit, they were like, I want to get out of town. And I got to tell you, these people are living a different life than you and I are.
Yeah, but it's great. And the problem, the vacation homes are the hardest ones because they have the least bandwidth. You know, like they'll be on the coast of Cape Cod and they have no bandwidth.
And then probably the most prominent person I recorded from, he to remain nameless, Sting. He just came in from his villa, and he just wanted to be up against the terracotta wall.
I was gonna say that's the one in Italy.
And 180 degrees. It was this beautiful backdrop with this giant mixer and all of his gear. And he was like, and his tech was like, he doesn't want to show that. I said, why? And he goes, taxes. He doesn't want the Italian government knowing he's working here.
All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. And he says, if the CXO is traveling on a private jet, would there be any way to get quality video and audio without breakup?
Go ahead, Carl.
That's actually something Elon Musk is working on with Starlink. So his own private jet he wants it on.
Yeah, so here's the problem is over terrestrial, you can get, it will break up a little bit. We've done it from a G4. If the over terrestrial, you can get it because it's pointed down. Now you need to get the new satellite dishes that go up that are, I think they're VSAT or whatever, that are going up to them, and you're still going to have a delay. You're going to have some breakup. The problem you get into is if you get into like places where over the coast becomes very hard. You just don't, you can't broadcast anywhere. So we were asked to do it over water, 130 miles out off the West Coast. That doesn't work. Like it doesn't. I'm just wondering. I tried a lot. I ate a lot of little sandwiches, but we weren't able to get a broadcast. And so so I think that you have to look at where it is. It's never going to be totally stable in that wireless, and the same that all wireless is not totally stable. I mean, maybe never is a big word, but you should manage expectations of how clear it is. The other thing you have to take into account is ambient noise is incredible. So, like you don't think about it as much until you turn it on. But you're at like 60, 70 dB of, sometimes 80 dB of engine noise. And so you need to think about how you're going to clean that up. So that's a place where, you need a seeder, or noise assist. I've not tried a noise assist in a plane recently. So, but seeders we used a lot to pull that back, into that area. And then you think that you can do it on the ground, like they could just be like they're in the thing, but the electricity in a 737 or a 320 won't turn on without the engines on. so even if you're on it, even if you want to have it there, you have to turn the engines on to get that in. So that becomes a whole nother problem again. So just in case you're wondering. No, anyway, those are planes. Next question. I can't hear you, Bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. Rupert McCrae in Dallas says, can we discuss the differences in dynamics between the corners of the C-suite, CEO, CFO, CMO, CIO, and so on?
Go ahead, Bill. Still can't hear you.
Here's something I've noticed is I work for bigger and bigger organizations, and I've got a couple that are pretty large. What used to be the top, I thought the chief executive officer totally ran everything below them, but you'll find that in the world of direct reports, I'm finding that some CEOs have 5 direct reports above them because they're in part of gigantic conglomerates and they are a division or a subset of a suite of companies. So it's harder and harder to tell, is the chief executive officer, the chief operating officer?
Well, but I think that the question is the dynamics of working with them, for the show. The CMOs are usually the easiest ones to work with. The CMOs are the ones that are worried about how they look and how they sound, because that's what they think about all the time. They see all the ads, they see all the stuff that's there. I think that's the, go ahead, Carl.
So again, this is from a photography point of view. If I have all of those executives in the room and I do CEO first, and they get to see how he or she behaves and how I treat them and how efficient I am with them, it makes things go way more better with all the rest of them. And sometimes they'll give me a bit more time, even though the CEO may be only 1 or 2 minutes. They may give me 5 minutes each because they feel comfortable with me after seeing me how I treated that CEO.
One of the things that's kind of funny is that something that I didn't notice. We had an event where we had artists talking, and then we also had the CFO talking. And we thought the artists would want this, right? They'd want a telestrator. So we put it up there so they could talk about the new design of the broadcast graphics and everything else. The people who love this are the CFO, because now they can circle things in Excel, and they went crazy. Like it was just like that when they underlined something, and they were like in the pre-show, and they're like, oh my goodness, and they're going like this, and they're circling things, and they're like, this is going to be great. And the whole way through, they're sitting there drawing on the graphs and annotating things, and look at this note. There's all this stuff that they can't put into the Excel file and into the graphs that they know. Like, see this little, like you'll see it. You'll have like this Excel graph. It'll look like this, or it'll look like it'll have some little hitch. And they'll go, you see this hitch? And they'll circle it, and they'll go, that's because of this. And suddenly you get this whole level of understanding that they have around the financials that they don't have a place to put them. They don't have a place to put that knowledge. It's just in the thing, and they'll get really excited about it. Not in shareholder meetings. They won't get excited in shareholder meetings, but in internal meetings with their folks, they love talking tech. Like, they get geeky and can do it when they can telestrate. So just something to think about. Next question.
Moving on, Douglas Carmichael is up next. And Douglas says, if the CXO in question does live events frequently and the organization can afford it, would assigning a specific tech to that person help bridge the gap?
we generally have the same. There's only three or four of us that will ever interact with executives. So it is the same people because it's always the same team. There's not that many executives that we have to break it up into a lot of different people. It's the same people that deal with it, and primarily Shannon and I, plus one or two other assistants are the two people that really interact with them. Go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, just keep in mind if a C-suite talent requests a specific team to work with them, make sure you provide them that team, or you may not see them again.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
Just like Teams and anything else, I mean, you don't normally work with CEOs the first time you're working for a corporation unless you have a reputation for doing this kind of work. You generally have to work your way up, and what you will learn is that you are passed along. If you do a really good job and the video comes out great for the division head of something, then they will pass your name up, and it's all these soft skills that are the reason they feel comfortable accelerating you to the next level of the organization. It's because you've done everything right, not just the technical work, but these relationship soft skills.
Yep. Greg.
Yeah, and don't assume that you're going to get a tech check. And I mean, my experience comes mostly from virtual, less so from on premises or in person. But particularly with virtual, and the longer we kind of go in this, I find that I get more and more pushback from people wanting to invest the time in doing a tech check, because as we kind of joked earlier, people do this all the time, so they know what they're doing. So, I think the best thing, and Carl talked a little bit about how people, what Carl talked about earlier was about gaining trust. When people see how you deal with someone at a high level, you're efficient, you're professional, what you're doing is you're gaining their trust. And so that's the best thing that you can do. If you can't stammer over your words, you can't be starstruck or awestruck. You've got to be efficient. You've got to be professional, and you've got to, typically I will only have people, if I don't get a tech check, sometimes I'll get people on maybe 30 minutes beforehand if I'm lucky, sometimes 20 minutes beforehand if I'm lucky. And I have to load my little checklist of things that I have to go down with them. And so being efficient in those, and as someone who works by myself, being efficient is really valuable.
And you'll ask questions that show that you're paying, close attention. We had an event in the East Room of the White House, and we had to meet with the entire team. The White House, there's if you do something there's a lot of people that are involved with you being there. And the fact that, the first question out, to set the pace, the first question out that came out of my mouth on the East Room was, we calculate that we need between 50 and 60 carpet squares. Should we bring those, or will you provide those? And that tells them that we're paying attention to everything, and that we respect the space that we're in, and that we, and everyone that worked on my team shows up in a suit, which nobody does. Like you walk, you see the rest of the crews show up in jeans and t-shirts, and anybody who's not on camera, to the White House. And we don't, we didn't do that. This is, and so as a result, you get kudos again, this was in the Obama era, but one of the folks from the White House team came over to our client and said, "This is the best team that's worked here in 30 years." That has done something in 30 years. That makes an impact, on your future, on everything. But that comes down to all those little details. We rehearsed the load in for a week. Because we only had a very specific amount of time, so that we would just over and over and over again figure out what cables and how to pull it out and how to set it up and how to work on it and everything else. And all of that seems like effort, like extra effort. But that one recommendation, is worth a lot of work. And so, you just really want to play super, super hard, on all of these events, on every event. You look at an opportunity to play hard enough to, because it's going to be a recommendation to the next one. Next question.
Michael Vosmean, Woodstock, Georgia. Oops, wrong thing is answered. That's all right. We're going to do that one. Thank you. Anyone familiar with Ceramonics Work From Home Professional Plus, an all-in-one system for non-professionals?
It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this works. They have it's pretty good. I've looked at some of the ones that some of the packages that Ceramonic is putting together, and a lot of them are relatively good. They're better than what almost everybody else has. So they're not incredible. I think that you can cobble something together for the same price that's better than what they're doing. But I think that they're better. What's interesting is watching things like Dropbox, Dropbox is probably the most aggressive in this area that we've seen, which is that they are Dropbox is giving their employees a certain amount of money to work from home. Like you can buy the kit that you need, the desk and the lights and the thing. Here's your budget. They're not going to, you don't have to come to the office, but it's going to be a great office experience. And as companies are that progressive about how they handle their workers, or their employees, that's going to change how all of this stuff works, because people are going to have better and better equipment when they're all buying them with their own money at home. It's going to be at a certain level when their company is giving them a budget. And, at the beginning of COVID, a lot of the companies did budget for their executives about $3,000 to $5,000 on average. And a lot of them, to upgrade what they had. And some of them used it, some didn't, but so we're going to start seeing more and more of that going through the system. This is only going to get better. Next question.
And the final one we've got in the regular queue from Stuart Fairweather here in the panel. He says, why is there no Google Translate option to convert natural language to C-suite speak?
It's so complicated. That's the problem. You can't, you can translate French to English, but that kind of translation, super complicated. Go ahead, Sky.
I recognized working at Microsoft, there was a lot of Harvard speak. And so they're always trying to outdo each other. And there's a lot of lexicon that was coming in from particular business schools. That's what I had recognized anyway.
I find that good English is all that's necessary, and usually as direct and simple and calm as possible. Calmness is a very, very powerful tool that of just speaking at a level. The other thing we don't tell people is that it's going great or it's going horribly. We just don't say anything, like it's nominal or it's not, it's nominal, or we're working on things, or it's good so far, and be conservative. People want to tell everyone that it's great, but the problem is if you tell everyone it's great all the time and it doesn't work, they won't trust you anymore. So you just have to understand that you have to, you always want to be conservative about what you say. Go ahead, Bill.
Doesn't hurt too to pay attention to what's popular in the business community. For example, for 2 or 3 years, everybody wanted to know who moved their cheese where back in the 70s and 80s. And if you're not up with the idioms of current business writing, and they change constantly and they evolve, it helps to know those things.
I will say, as someone, after working all over the world, I try to avoid idioms altogether. Like I just try to, I am super low key about those things because I don't know where I'm at. I'm dealing with people all over the world, and so and they won't get it. So I just stay with simple nouns and verbs, for the most part as I talk to folks. Go ahead, Leland. Real quick, we're running out of time. Leland, Stuart, and then Courtney, and then we're gonna close it up.
Yep, I was just going to cover when approaching these C types, every time you go, it's a good kind of way to give them an advanced warning. Get an email format together that gives them an idea of what you're going to do in a tech prep. Mm-hmm. Have that be the first connection that you make with them as the tech that's going to be working with them. And that way, when you meet them, they kind of have that expectation of what they're going to be put up against. They're not coming in blind. They're not looking at you as, okay, what is this guy going to expect from me? They know. And that way they're not as nervous, and you can kind of take it from there. Be that lead person that takes charge of that meeting. Don't let them take charge of how they're going to look on the camera. You do have to be stern sometimes and make certain that you're doing the right thing. That's all I wanted to close.
Just again with the language and the look, how they look on camera. Is there any cultural differences that we're spotting between, say, US CEOs versus Australian versus UK, with the importance they place on their appearance? It seems that coming out of North America, there is a lot more professionalism granted to people who look good on camera. A lot of what I see here is people who just don't give a damn about it.
I think there's more pressure because there's more money pushed into the system here than there is in other places. And the corporations oftentimes are a little larger in a lot of ways. And so it's a little less casual. Like they're more of them are on a global stage. And so I think they pay more attention to it. But you can see Hosmuk pushing people in South Africa to up their game. So it can be done. Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you're working with a corporate executive, doing a speech for other corporate executives, don't ever spell check it or grammar check it, because C-speak uses nouns for verbs and verbs for nouns all the time. And don't ever fix it yourself. Just go with it. Very
good. All right.
Let's workshop that.
Good Good conversation. So well done by the producers. We had just the right number of questions for what we were doing here. So you did well there, and a great conversation with the panel. So a lot of good experience. So thanks to everyone. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about remote switching, which we're playing with a lot. So stay tuned for that. And now we're going to jump into the post show, the after hours.